Good afternoon. It's February 11th. I'm Carleen Johnson with another episode of Washington in Focus Daily. It's day 31 of the Washington State Legislative Session. And as your state capitol correspondent, I got to bring you up to speed with everything happening. And there is some momentum, Republicans believe, on the side of the fight with the income tax debate. You recall that we have Senate Bill 6346 that was introduced by Republicans. Gosh, it was only a week ago yesterday. The bill was introduced. It was fast-tracked to receive a public hearing on Friday and then voted out of the Senate Ways and Means Committee on Monday. And so the bill could be brought to a full Senate floor vote at any time. This is a tax, as supporters call it, the millionaire's tax. That's 9.9% tax on anyone with income over $1 million or combined household income. So two spouses have a combined household income over $1 million and would basically be paying nearly $100,000 of that to go into a fund for public education, some other health insurance, some other priorities, and then the general fund. They could decide what they want to do with this money. Of course, opponents say it's a slippery slope toward a full-on income tax that will hit everybody. So on Tuesday, the Associated Press put out an article about the migration of wealthy people from states like California and Washington. It's getting a lot of attention here at the state capitol, where, they're saying, where's everybody going? Well, according to this article that appeared yesterday in the AP, a lot of people are leaving Washington state and high income earners and headed toward Henderson, Nevada, of all places. That is apparently a popular place to be going at this point. We're going to get into that in just a minute. We're going to get into some discussion of a bill that would make a pretty significant change in penalties for convicted sex offenders who fail to register in the state. It's currently a felony. The bill that is being promoted would make it only a gross misdemeanor. So we'll wade into that and why. And then also, I spoke today with my colleague, TJ Martinell, our investigative reporter for Center Square, Washington, who has written today on a new lawsuit. Yes, it's the press credential saga part 97, which I must say has actually become kind of a daily joke in the wings of the legislature, with various members saying, oh, you're still credentialed. So we'll get into all of that. So item number one, everybody wants to escape Washington. Apparently at this point, there's a mass migration out of the state. Now, depending on who you ask, you get Democrats in the majority who support the millionaire's tax, the income tax, as Republicans call it, saying nobody's going to leave. They've got enough money that they can take a big hit of $100,000 on $1 million that they make. But according to real estate agents and U-Haul trends, there are a heck of a lot of people who make a heck of a lot of money in the state of Washington moving to other states. And a large chunk of that migration is going to Nevada and places like Henderson, Nevada. And I spoke today with Representative April Connors, who is a Republican from Kennewick. Her perspective is unique in that she's a real estate agent. And she's been in this arena for a long time, well before she ever got into politics. And she says that she definitely has people reaching out to her saying, or she's already helped them relocate to other states, or, they're talking to her about wanting to relocate. She said in some cases, their entire family. So I'm waiting to see part of my interview today with Representative April Connors.
I think that when the Democrats think that people are not leaving the state, I think that they're wrong. They're seeing some net in by U-Haul, so they're saying, no, more people want to come to Washington, which isn't the case with our really good taxpayers that have been here for a long time. And really this started happening, Carleen, when the estate tax came down, which they moved it to 35%. So we're seeing a lot of it is capital flight. It is, Washington has consistently, especially it started with the capital gains tax, moved into the estate tax, and now it's going to move into this millionaire's tax. And where my big concern is not just the selling of these homes in Washington state and people relocating, is we're also losing philanthropy dollars. We're losing people that sit on Rotary clubs. We're losing people that contribute to the Boys and Girls Clubs. And I think we're going to see continued flight. They're seeing flight in California from their taxes that are happening as well. And so as these blue states keep implementing and charging the rich, or what they're saying is the rich, more and more and more, we see people to continue to move and be driven out of Washington.
One of the other controversial bills that lawmakers are dealing with this session is House Bill 2403. Now, this would lower the seriousness felony level of felony failure to register. So right now, the way it is in the state of Washington, if you are a convicted sex offender, you serve your time, you're released back into the community, whether that's into a less restrictive alternative group home, or you're just going back to live with a friend, or you got your own apartment. You have a very short period of time to register your address. That is so that folks in the community who might want to, know where you're living, or potentially even folks who've been victimized, have some idea of where this person's living. Right now, it is a felony in the state of Washington not to register. I believe it's a 30-day time period. I have to double check on that, but I believe it's within 30 days. But we have Representative Daria Farivar, prime sponsor of this bill 2403, that says we don't need to do that. There are a variety of reasons, she contends, why people can't meet the 30-day requirement to register. So it shouldn't be a felony. It should be a gross misdemeanor, far less consequence. And Republicans, including Representative Brian Burnett of the Chelan County area, former sheriff of Chelan County, who says, this is the wrong direction to go. And he points to this legislation as being another example of, the criminals being put ahead of the victims. So I spoke with him this week about his serious concerns with the bill. And here's what he told me.
What they're wanting to do is they're wanting to minimize that charge and that conviction, instead of have it be a felony conviction for a person that's been convicted of a felony sex crime and done their time and come out, and then they fail to register, they fail to comply with the simple things. It's not rocket science. It may be inconvenient, but it's not hard. Okay, there's people there to help walk you through this process, but they want to minimize that and bring that down into the misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor level, and then you have to have multiple charges before it rises to the level of a felony sex offense. They said it shouldn't be a sex offense. It should only be a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor conviction again. But here's the deal. Statistics speak that those who avoid registration purposely are the red flags. Okay, those are the ones that are more likely to be deviant and devious, to do things to harm our children and our most vulnerable. And so I just can't agree with that. I think this is something that we should not be okay with, that those people, because the harm that they put on people is long lasting trauma that lasts for years, if not a lifetime. And that's just not okay. We need to hold these people accountable. A lot of times there are specific restrictions on them. You can't live within a certain amount of here. You can't go here. You can't do that. A lot of times it's just like knowing and keep people accountable. So we have that ability. We have these registered sex offender programs that are run through the sheriff's office. They get grant funding. They designate specific staff to there. They go out and do spot checks. They talk to the people. They make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's the right thing. This is not the way to go. Please contact your legislators, sign in, and oppose this bill. We should not be going backwards. We should be moving forward.
Okay, and finally, as promised, an update now on a brand new lawsuit filed over the press credentialing saga here in Olympia. This one filed by Citizens Action Defense Fund against the Washington State House and other entities for the denial of press credentials for several independent journalists. And the suit claims it violates First Amendment rights for KVI's conservative talk show host Ari Hoffman, also Brandy Cruz, who has the Undivided podcast, and Jonathan Cho, who's an independent journalist with Turning Point USA and Discovery Institute. So TJ and I had a discussion today about his article, which was posted this morning, Wednesday morning, at thecentersquare.com/Washington. And TJ has been following this issue very, very closely for the last year or so. Here's that interview with TJ. Okay, an update on the credential saga that we have reported on many times for our faithful Washington in Focus viewers. And now comes a new lawsuit over the credentialing of media at the Washington State Capitol, with a new lawsuit that is filed by the Citizen Action Defense Fund. This article put up on our Center Square Washington page by my colleague TJ Martinell, our investigative reporter for the Center Square Washington. And this concerns the denial of press credentials to not one, not two, but at least three, and there may be others joining, independent journalists who've been denied access to the Washington State Capitol. TJ, I feel like we've been talking about this for more than a year, because I guess we have. Catch me up to speed with the latest lawsuit that's been filed this week.
Well, yeah, they're effectively arguing that this is violating their First Amendment rights and freedom of the press by denying them press credentials. And for people who are not, I think one thing that we really need to clarify, because a lot of people are starting to get confused with this whole notion. You do not need to be credentialed to be a member of the media or be a journalist or a reporter. There's no legal distinction between a reporter and a private citizen exercising their First Amendment right. So let's keep that in mind. What this is concerning is the ability of journalists and reporters to obtain press credentials so that they can access sections of the state capitol that is not open to the public. So that's the legislative wings, that's media availability, press conferences and things like that, where you have access to lawmakers. You can talk to them while they're not on the Senate or House floor. You're right there, on the front lines of legislating. And so you're able to talk to them in real time as things are going on, and it just allows you a greater, closer look at what's actually going on in the state capitol. And it's just, it improves the journalistic quality of these stories. So the issue is, why were they denied? And, some of the arguments made is that they engage in activism. And I think it was Brandy Cruz who noted that the Seattle Times president testified in favor of several bills that would have given they were probably going to apply for the funding. And so they're literally going to the state legislature and asking for money, or for a bill that creates a program that would give them money potentially. And so her argument is, how is that not activism? So I think that's the big question to ask. And I think what's really interesting about this is the lawsuit includes the Capitol Correspondents Association, which is a private entity that used to have press credentialing authority, but they gave it back to the legislature. The reason they're being included in the lawsuit is because they're still involved in this process by giving guidance and advice and counsel to the state house. And so I think that it's interesting that they're still involved, even though they handed over authority. And it seems like that was done to avoid being sued, and that didn't quite work out, obviously.
Well, what's been interesting is, after the whole, our organization at the Center Square got involved in kind of pressing this issue a little bit when they were trying to deny some of our staff members credentialing. Then, as you mentioned, they, kind of threw up their hands and said, okay, we're going to let lawmakers control all of this stuff. And we immediately had basically the House, Washington State House, saying, we'll make it easy. You get your pass for every week. But the Senate has continued to be a little bit more difficult. You can get a weekly paper pass that always kind of falls off. So I have to fold it up and put it inside because it falls off the lanyard. You get a weekly pass for the Senate. So you've got these, differing criteria and decisions on who is a legitimate member of the press and who isn't. And I love how you said the importance of it is, we all have access. Private Joe Citizen can come and watch what's happening in Olympia, or be up in the gallery, or, try to get access to a lawmaker in their office. But to get into the wings, you need those media credentials. And that's where you can sit and wait for a member to walk off the floor after a controversial floor vote and say,
Right.
So-and-so, you just voted this way. Can I talk to you for 2 minutes? That access is very, very important for freedom of the press. As somebody who's here every day in Olympia, I can tell you that that's where you get, the real, the raw interview, especially after someone's coming off the floor after a very passionate debate. So I wanted to ask your opinion on this, TJ, because you and I have been covering this story, like I said, for the last year.
Right.
Brandy Cruz, Jonathan Cho, Ari Hoffman, not all just independent, YouTuber, Timmy's got 17 followers on YouTube and has decided to cover the news. All three of them have long-term legitimate broadcasting careers prior to, and Ari still does with KVI, but Brandy and Jonathan have gone off onto their own sort of more independent avenues, but legitimate members of the press. So I don't know how you gauge the criteria for who's legit and who isn't.
I think there's two things, and this is, a perspective is this is at a time when the number of reporters covering the state legislature is at a very low. I couldn't say all-time low because I don't know. I just know that it's ironic because the Seattle Times president was testifying saying, newsrooms are shrinking, number of reporters are shrinking. Right. That means that there's fewer reporters at the state capitol. So, what's the issue? What is the risk of having somebody credentialed that they don't think should be? Because if there was so many reporters out there that they had to start restricting and you started to have permits, I could see where they're like, you know what, we have so
That's
many
a
people.
good point. That's a really good point.
But it seems like the biggest thing is you have someone who's there, gets a press pass or credential, and then starts disrupting things. They go to media availabilities and they throw a temper tantrum, or they disrupt the questions, or they're just behaving in an unprofessional manner.
But it hasn't happened. As you know, it hasn't happened.
Right. And so the question is, what is the media press credentialing intended to prevent? And is it intended to prevent people? I'm trying to understand, from their perspective. And the other thing I find interesting, and I don't know if this is applicable with the state house still, I think it was back years ago when I was trying, when this issue was kind of coming up, but they have rules about the funding mechanism for a media outlet, and if they're getting money from certain people. So my question is this: should media outlets that receive money from the government be allowed to be credentialed? Because that's what we could potentially see, if this
that'd get rid of half of the press corps at least.
And so it's like, okay, you can't. For example, you're not allowed to get credentialed if your organization gets money from a lobbyist. Well, fair enough, but now you've got people covering the legislature potentially who gets money from them. How is that not a conflict of interest in that regard? Or organizations that get money. So I think that's a good question to ask, and really raises the issue of are we moving towards state-sponsored journalism, and how is that in keeping with the First Amendment? Because we have a separation. There's the argument of like the state, you can't have a state church, right? And that's in our state constitution and in the U.S. Constitution. But should you really be able to have state-sponsored media outlets? The people that they're supposed to hold accountable are the ones writing the checks, right? It's like a lawyer being asked to investigate their own client. That's not how it works.
In Washington, maybe sometimes, but I digress. I want to play this clip because we got a chance to sit down with Jackson Maynard for a few minutes yesterday. He's the lead counsel with Citizen Action Defense Fund, representing Jonathan Cho, Brandy Cruz, and Ari Hoffman in this lawsuit over credentialing. So here's a bit of that interview.
The suit this morning on behalf of Brandy Cruz, Jonathan Cho, and Ari Hoffman. You may remember a couple weeks ago I sent a letter on Mr. Hoffman's behalf because he had been denied a press pass. And it was fairly clear that the House did not have any clear guidelines. It's still not clear from the record, but was either being made by the House with the advice of the Capitol Correspondents Association, or the Capitol Correspondents Association was making the decision. But the bottom line is the way that they were going about it violated the constitutional rights of both Ari and then we found out Brandy Cruz and Jonathan Cho. And so the suit is to go in court and have a judge basically order the House of Representatives, the legislature, and the clerk of the House and the Capitol Correspondents Association to follow the law. In the letters that the clerk sent to Ms. Cruz and Mr. Hoffman, They said the denial was in part due to what they listed, and I think they said, well, we think because of your opinion that you're not independent enough a journalist. And then in Mr. Cho's case, they said, oh, well, because your organization that you're a part of is not a news organization. Of course, he works for the news section of the Discovery Institute as well as other journalistic organizations. So they're just not consistently applying the guidelines, and it's unclear what else in addition to those guidelines that they are applying. So our argument's kind of two parts with them. First, that the guidelines they're applying are vague, ambiguous, and they're not being consistently applied. And then secondly, even if you take these vague guidelines, they actually met the qualifications, and yet they were still denied the passes. And so you just can't do that under the case law that we cited in the lawsuit. We're gonna try to get a hearing as soon as we possibly can and get this before a court so that they can hopefully vindicate the rights of these journalists.
So TJ, I know this is an issue you're not letting go of. I don't know how long things are going to take to play out with this lawsuit, but from what Jackson Maynard told me yesterday, he believes this is one of the most critical cases that he's pushed in recent history as far as access goes for media. And as a member of the media, I know you care intimately about this. So I'll give you the last few seconds to close out here.
Yeah, I think it goes back to something I really want to emphasize, because I've seen videos of reporters and independent journalists out there and being confronted by somebody saying, are you a credentialed reporter? There's no such, outside of our state legislature and in those specific areas, there's no such thing as credentialed. And I've been hearing that over the last 10 years where people are like, well, you're not credentialed. It's like, first of all, the First Amendment doesn't give me the right to free speech, and it doesn't give you or anybody else the right to free speech. It's acknowledging that we have that right to free speech. It's not a permission card. We don't need permission to be, or we don't need a license, right? We're not doctors, we're not lawyers, we're not physicians or whatever it is, and we don't need a PhD or a master's degree or anything else to practice journalism. So it worries me when people start using that term as if we need to get somebody else's permission in order to exercise our First Amendment rights. So that's something that as this lawsuit moves forward, this is fighting for that in that context, but at the same time, outside of this, that isn't an issue for anybody. So if we're out doing reporting and somebody says, are you credentialed? It's like, I don't need to be credentialed.
That's right. Well, and that important to note though, somebody like you or me, credentialed with the Center Square, when you go out to interview somebody, ask questions or whatever, I always will have my, credentials with me and identify myself. But you're right. It isn't. And if somebody doesn't think I'm legit, I don't have a right to be asking questions. You don't have to respond. House Republicans, as you noted in your article, TJ, did this week say anybody who wants to have access to any of our members, come back to the wings, have at it. They said more sunlight, more transparency, is the right answer, especially at this time in history. So thank you so much for writing about this critical issue. I would encourage any of our readers, any of our viewers here today to check out thecentersquare.com and TJ's article. Let me go back to the top of this. Your article is titled Lawsuit Filed Over Denial of Press Credentials to Journalists by Washington State House. Appreciate you, TJ. Thanks for joining me. So that's it for today, day 31 of the 60-day legislative session here in Olympia. While everybody else is up north in Seattle watching the Seahawks Super Bowl victory parade, we're down here covering the legislature. So thank you for tuning in for another episode of Washington in Focus Daily. For now, I'm Carleen Johnson. Thanks for watching.